I'm Dr. Carrie Horn, author of A Soul Aligned, How God Heals His Creations, and Heart Known Series Workbook, a practical application workbook for biblical healing. There's a theme that God's been talking with me about for a few days now and putting into my dreams and things like this. And that theme is that God did not design us for this world or for the things of this world. God designed us for His purposes. And because we're living in this world and we're bombarded by all of these messages and distortions and for an agenda that is contrary and in opposition to Christ, we've been deceived. And it's really hard to get back to understanding what it is that God desires and why it is He's designed us for that purpose. And even though that's hard, it's a hard thing to do, and it really kind of stretches us in terms of our understanding and this sort of thing. God can cut through all of that. He can speak to us and He can give us truth, even though we've been deceived for our entire lifetime. And all throughout the Bible, God talks to us about return to Him and He will heal us, return to Him and He'll restore us. He'll speak to us. He'll give us wisdom. He'll give us understanding. All throughout the Bible, He talks about that. And right now, in particular, this point in history, this point in this whole thing that He's been doing in this age, it is a time of return. And He's calling His people in, and He's calling them in ways that we're unfamiliar with, through affliction, through grief, by opening our eyes and causing us to realize that what we've believed in is not real. It's not true. The things we've been taught, the things that we're constantly being bombarded with and brainwashed by are not true. And there's two things in particular that God is talking with me about in my particular situation. Two things that I was plagued by the majority of my life. And one is that I needed a human partner in order for me to be whole, that I needed a husband in order to be whole and fulfilled. And the other is that I needed to be a machine in order to get things done, in order to rise above the upward battle that I had, the adversities that I faced, that I needed to be a machine for the world. And the first one I want to address first and foremost, because I don't want anyone to misunderstand what I'm saying. God does not despise marriage. God loves marriage. He uses it as an example to help us to understand our covenant with Him. He uses marriage. We have a marriage with Christ. He uses it symbolically. But we also see that in the Bible that Paul says, I wish you were all like me. I have every right to get married, but I wish you were all like me because he stayed single so that he could be single-minded for the purpose for which God set him apart, so that there was no distraction of him trying to please a partner. And I don't want you to think that, again, marriage is not wrong. Paul acknowledges that. It's not a sin to be married. Marriage is absolutely beautiful. But in my particular case, God has not set me apart for that, and He has spoken to me about that at length. The purpose for which He has set me apart does not include marriage to a human in this life. But it was something that I was raised to believe that was my entire purpose in life. I was raised to believe that it wasn't important for me to really accomplish anything, to really do anything in this life, because I was just going to get married and that would be my life. But that's not what God set me apart for. It's not even included in the plan that God set me apart for. And it doesn't mean that that's not included in the plan that you've been set apart for, but it's not in my case. In my case, God has a very specific purpose that He is enacting through me. And I spent many years acting out idolatry in relationships, idolatry of men, and it took me away from my true purpose of serving God. He is my husband. Whether or not you're in a marriage or a relationship, you need to be serving God first. And if we are in a marriage or a relationship, we need to be glorifying God. He needs to be at the center of our relationship. And we need to be glorifying him through our relationship, bearing witness to others of what it looks like to have Christ at the center of our relationship. Now, the second thing that I believed was that I came here to achieve and to make my own life. And I took very seriously what I saw going on in my family and rising above that, rising above the dysfunction, rising above poverty, changing that course. And the ironic thing is that the more that I tried within the world's disciplines, the more that I tried in and of myself by the work of my own hands, I actually made things worse in my family in many ways rather than better. There were some ways that I made things better, but there were many ways that I made things worse. And the more that I worked for the world and did what the world told me to do, the more I became a soldier for the world. And there were certain things that we were taught when we were growing up, that you go and you get an education, that is going to make your life good. You go and get an education, you get a degree, you build a career. Education is power. I mean, right there, that wording should be a warning sign to us. Anything that the world says is power is probably satanic, is probably contrary to what Christ actually values. And when the Father drew me to the Son, he said to me that I was about to unlearn everything I thought I knew. At that point, I did not know what he was talking about. But I realize now that unlearning everything that I had learned in the world was exactly what needed to happen in order for me to understand truth in him, in order for me to understand how I had been deceived by the world. And there's something that God has been doing with me probably for about the last week, concurrently with other things that I've talked about. And this thing is what he's speaking into today and kind of bringing the themes together of the dreams that he's been giving me and what he's been talking with me about and rising to the surface. And I always tell you that God, the right arm seems to have nothing to do with the left leg until you look at the whole body. And God is always weaving together a picture. He's always bringing together themes of what he's building in us. And we just need to listen. We need to listen, and we need to sit and deal with our feelings, sit and listen to our feelings, get them out in our journals, look at what it is that God has been doing. Because if we're just looking at these individual things the way that the world does, right? It's measuring only that which is measurable. It's not looking at the whole picture. Even within medicine, we see that you go to a specialist and they don't seem to know how the whole body works. They only know how the liver works. They don't have the whole picture, and therefore they don't have truth. They just have a bunch of pieces. But that's not how God is. He's conforming everything for his will. He conforms all things. He has designed everything according to his will. He speaks about everything in parables, in our bodies, in our feelings, in our dreams. He's bringing everything together, an entire picture. And in this way, when we see the picture there and we realize all of the things that he brought together, he reveals his glory, because there's no way that we could have brought all of those things together. And so he reveals his glory and he proves to us, and he loves that, right? He wants us to see his glory. He wants us to know that he is God, and he wants us to acknowledge that he is God. And these things build our confidence in him, and they allow us to give a little more and a little more and a little more until we're truly in him, until we're truly relying and trusting, submitting ourselves, obeying him. It's something that happens in our mutual relationship, not something that he does unilaterally to us. We have to receive. We have to be active participants. That is the covenant that we have with him. So the thing that he's been talking with me about today, or bringing it in, has to do with rest. It has to do with, part of one of the grievances that I was bringing to him is Lord, I'm so tired. I'm so tired and sleepy. You're doing something in me. Why are you afflicting me like that? Why are you afflicting me with this sleepiness, with this lack of energy? Don't I need energy in order to do what you want me to do? And he reminds me of a couple things. One thing that he reminds me of is it's not by power or might, but by his spirit. The other thing he reminds me is that he has always given me the energy to do what he wants me to do. But he also will bring me low, and he will afflict me or cause me to be sleepy when he wants to pull me in. And the reason for that, there are different things that he does when he wants to get my attention. That's one thing that he does. Another thing that he does is he'll wake me up around 4:30, like around that time. And I know, okay, he wants to talk to me. Now, could he talk to me at 7:30? Sure, he could. If my flesh was down, if I wasn't waking up with all my ideas and thoughts and desires that get in the way and plans. So if I have not been disciplining my flesh, or if he wants to get me when my flesh is down, he will wake me up. And if there is a specific message that he wants to speak to me, and he needs for my flesh to be low, he will do things like that, like wake me up when I'm still kind of in a twilight sleep. And that is because, again, I need to be in position in order for him to talk with me and in order for me to actually listen. Another thing he'll do is tell me to do a fast. And if I'm really not listening to him, he will send a situation. His voice will get louder. And we know that the Lord does not send grief willingly, but he does send it if that's what's needed, and we're not, because we haven't been listening or we're not bringing ourselves into position. He will then bring us into position. So God will give me whatever is needed in order for me to do his will. But again, it's not by my power, not by my might, not by my ideas or plans or anything else that God accomplishes his will. The work he requires is submission, obedience, and reliance. It's not the work of the world. It's so contrary to the work of the world, right? Because if the world told me to make this video, for example, I would then go research what some man had to say about what it is that I was going to teach you. And then I would cite that. I'd be so bogged down in citing the research and making sure I'm substantiating my claims with man. Who is man anyway, by the way? But I'd be so bogged down with that and the planning and the carnality involved, there would be no God in that message. And that is the intention of the prince of the world. That's the intention of Satan. That's why he establishes all of these strategies and tactics within the world in order to deceive us, in order to make us think that that is somehow normal. That's not normal. You know what's normal? When you feel tired, you take a nap. You rest. And it just might be that God is causing you to take a nap because he needs your flesh to come down. But the world will tell you, you can't just take a nap in the middle of the day. You need to drink some coffee and suck it up. God's not going to pay your bills. You have to work these 2 jobs, or you have to fill in the blank, right? You know all the things that the world tells you to do, but God makes us sleepy for a reason. And then we go to a doctor and we think that we have some sort of syndrome. So we start fabricating this syndrome in our heads that, oh, I'm just so tired all the time. I don't know what's wrong with me. And in my lifetime, I've been placed on stimulants. I've been given supplements. I've been given all kinds of stuff. For what? The way God designed me? If God is making you sleepy, he's calling you to rest in him, to trust in him. And in order for us to give ourselves permission to do what God is speaking into our bodies, take a nap, for example, take a break from the world, or even trust that it's okay for us to take a nap. We have to trust him. We have to rest in him. We have to rely, and we have to believe that God is the one doing this and that it's okay. He's going to take care of us. And when I'm first working with people, most people have a spirit of fear that's been compelling them their whole lives, or the majority of their lives. And when they do their fast, this is one of the things that comes in, right? When they first start healing, they start to feel sleepy, but they also concurrently feel peace. And they'll say things like, and especially these like people who have chronic illness, quote unquote, chronic illness or chronic issues like in their bodies, they'll say things like, I can't really explain this, but I know that God is healing me. I just feel peace and I've just been resting. That is invariably what people tell me when they first begin to heal. And it's like so profound to them because they haven't been resting. That's like contrary to their experience in this world. They have not been resting. They haven't felt peace. And so it's really profound for them. But I want you to know that's our design. We are not meant to be machines for the world. We're not meant to be going from here to there to here to there constantly. We're not meant to be jacking ourselves up on caffeine. By the way, caffeine was not even a thing when Christ, that was not something that Christ drank. That wasn't something that Christians got together at Starbucks or whatever the biblical Starbucks would have been. There was nothing like that back then. Coffee was actually discovered as and used as an insecticide because it jacked up the autonomic arousal of bugs and killed them. So we're able to drink it because we are bigger than a bug. Our bodies are able to tolerate it, but you need to understand this was used to kill a smaller creature. It's not good for us, first of all, but my major issue with it is that it increases autonomic arousal, which is the very thing that we're trying to decrease so that we can hear God. It is something that takes us away from personal relationship and attunement. It takes us out of the heart and spirit and into the flesh. And we're doing all of this work to get into the heart and spirit. Why would we want to take something that's going to work against all of the work that we're doing? And I truly believe that that is Satan's work. It is something that he has made so readily accessible and so normal for us to push ourselves with a stimulant so that we can perform, most importantly, so that we can be distracted and pulled back into the flesh. It's very easy for him to do his work when we're in the flesh. So I think that it would be impossible for me to really cover all of the strategies and tactics of the enemy in the world that go against our design. But what I want to encourage you to do is to begin thinking about attuning yourself, praying about what your design is, and start paying attention to the way that the world or the prince of the world through the world attempts to distort your design and take you away from God. The lies that you've been fed about what your design is, what your purpose is, and what you're doing here. It is not God's value for you to go and get an education of the world and continue to be in your carnality all the time, right? Mandatory education, always having to be in your carnality, always having to be judged based on your carnality, graded on your carnality, brainwashed, indoctrinated, not just about information, but about what matters. what your purpose is, what your design is. You have not been designed for this world. You have been designed for Christ. And so if we're going to understand truth, we have to return to Him, and we have to be thinking and understanding in all things. And when I say thinking, I'm saying thinking with the mind of the heart, the cardia, Kardia, the mind of the heart. And why do we want to be in the mind of the heart? Because that's where God is. God's Spirit was placed in our hearts, and He communicates with us by His Spirit. That's where we want to be living. And so in all things, we need to be wondering and conforming ourselves back to, how did God design me? What is God's will for me? What is His desire? And that desire to understand that begins in our hearts God is going to speak into that. And everything else is going to begin to make sense. You'll begin to be bestowed understanding and wisdom that is from God, not from this world. You'll begin to see the places that you've been deceived. You'll begin to see why it is that the world does things in the way that they do things, and how that is in opposition to the will of God. I hope and pray that this video has been helpful to you, just in terms of even using those examples that I've used. But truly, it's so important that we're returning to God and we're seeking His values, His desires, His intentions. He is the creator of all. And so we have to get those answers from Him. We have to get that understanding from Him if we're going to heal and be changed. Thank you so much for listening. God bless you. And I'll see you in the next video.